Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am Amanda Panacea, and today I have a really special guest. I'm thrilled to have on Adrian Davidson. You know her on Instagram and Substack as Capitalism and Glitter. And I was interested in having her on because she is really good at storytelling. And also she was the first person that I had seen talk about the RCCX theory, which is a genetic lens at helping to understand the genetic component that might explain why so many complex chronic conditions overlap with each other. So things like mast cell activation, hypermobility, POTS, neurodivergence, sensitivity to stress, autoimmunity, all of those things kind of have this cluster of a genetic component. And she has explained this really well in her writing. And I love following her for a variety of reasons because she overlaps that health piece and culture, especially pop culture, and the lens of how health kind of plays into that, as well as on top of things like politics and some fun stories about celebrities and things like that. And on top of that, she has also healed pretty much all of those complex chronic conditions and put them into remission. So she has a lot of personal experience on what it takes to actually heal these things. She has done she has done so holistically, as well as has some great insight and some great recommendations for how people can also start to heal themselves with and without certain types of practitioners. So I know you're going to love this conversation. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am Amanda Panacea, and I'm really excited today to sit down with Adrian Davidson. She has a really incredible journey of recovering from mast cell activation, as well as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and a slew of other things like vaccine injury. So I'm really excited to sit down and talk to her about how she figured all of this out. And also, she's not a practitioner, but she's got some incredible additional support for you on her Substack and just ways that you can also start to unravel your own journey. Because I love how she talks about everything that she had to figure out on her own with very to little no help from any Western medicine. And that's really why I thought it was great to have her on the podcast. So, hi, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so again, you have a really cool and incredible story of like just figuring so much stuff out. So I'd love if you could start with like when you started to get sick, and why you think you got sick, and when you started to kind of unravel your own history.
Sure. So, when I got sick there's like multiple answers to that because
Yeah.
I feel I've dealt with chronic illness like my entire life. Um, so I got really sick in 2020. I got COVID in March of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, I was sick for like a week. I thought I recovered from it. It was the craziest virus I'd ever had. Like I had weird dreams and stuff, and I was like, there's something really different about this illness. And then I thought I recovered after a week, and then I started having weird symptoms after that, like heart palpitations. I couldn't stand up. I later got diagnosed with POTS and mast cell activation syndrome, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And when I started, so I sat down that summer of 2020 to make like a whole timeline because I was like, I've had these symptoms for my whole life. So why are they now disabling? And obviously it was like a very stressful time. in the world. I had a 2-year-old, the world was shut down. I also had like a pretty like high powered career at the time that I'd had to like step away from because I could no longer do it, which was very frustrating. Like my identity was really wrapped up in my like professional identity. Um, so I sat down to make like a list, like a kind of timeline of all of all of these symptoms and things that had started for me really when I was like a baby. So my first mast cell symptoms, my first mast cell reaction was when I was 1. I went to the neighbor's yard. They told me I could eat. They grew strawberries, and they told me I could eat like whatever I wanted, and I'm 1, so I like toddle over there and eat all of them and break out in this huge crazy rash. Which is very confusing to my mom because I wasn't allergic to strawberries. But we lived in a house on the Northern California coast that was very damp, smelled like mold. When it smelled too strongly, she'd just like turn on the wood burning stove to mask the smell. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like writing down all these symptoms, like, okay, so mold, mast cell, POTS. Um, I've always been hypermobile. Um, so summer of 2020, I was just kind of overwhelmed with finally getting answers to things that had plagued me my whole life. Um, I also, I had strongly believed in, well, I had like a love-hate relationship with Western medicine. Um, because I'd had all these symptoms when I was a kid. I got really sick when I was 7. I got really sick again with Epstein-Barr in high school, and it went undiagnosed. I only was diagnosed with strep throat. It didn't clear after 1 round of antibiotics, so they gave me another round, which completely wrecked my gut. I definitely had chronic fatigue syndrome, which was also not diagnosed. It wasn't until 3 years later that someone actually checked antibodies and found out that I had Epstein-Barr, and they asked like, oh, when did you have mono? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what it was. Like I had to do like homeschool for years in high school. I graduated in a wheelchair. Like it was really bad. So
Wow.
through high school, I basically was like, okay, you guys don't know anything. Like I just did not trust doctors anymore. I just had like a litany of tests and no answers, and ended up being prescribed Paxil off label for kids at like 16. And I was like, yeah, sure, I guess I have like some depression and anxiety, but like there's a lot of like, I have gut issues. I can't stop sleeping. Like I knew there was something more. Um, so I kind of checked out of Western medicine. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology. Um, and I still, even though I didn't believe in Western medicine, I still believed in vaccines. But when I had put together my whole health chronology in 2020, I realized because I had my records from Kaiser from when I was a kid, and I could see the dates of when I got certain vaccines and then when I had other issues pop up. And so there was a period of 6 months when I was 7 where I had strep throat really badly. A month later, I got the MMR. And then I started having like crazy like symptoms of encephalitis, like brain inflammation. I had hallucinations, like I thought I was going to die. It was really bad. And then I couldn't stop getting sick. I got strep all the time. I ended up like leaving school because I was so sick that time when I was 7. Um, so yeah, that's sort of my like where it started and where it
Yeah.
ended. Summer of 2020, I like put everything together and was like, wow, you guys still don't know anything in Western medicine.
Yeah.
I have like the names of things and like associated symptoms, and I can see these patterns and like try to unravel it.
Yeah. And where do you even start? I mean, luck, I can't believe you had your childhood records, first of all. So most of us will not have that. But as of, I also like identified as a sick kid. I got pneumonia all the time. I had really bad asthma and I was allergic to everything. I missed so much school. I missed so many trips and things like that. And never really put 2 and 2 together besides like, oh, I just have bad genes. This is just the hand that I was dealt. And of course, asking my mom, like, did I have bad reactions to vaccines or anything like that? It was no, no, that never happened. Did
Yeah.
we ever have mold in the house? No, of course not. That never happened. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay. most people won't have that level of detail. So how
Yeah,
do you start to put all of these things together once you're like, okay, I really suspect there's something larger going on?
I had similar resistance to parents. So my mom, when I was 7 and all that crazy stuff was happening, my mom was going back to school to get her master's degree in psychology, and she became a child therapist. So um, she and my parents were divorced, and my dad was kind of checked out of this kind of stuff. So she always really saw the like psychological side and
Yeah.
was completely unaware of the medical side. Um, and I still have a lot of resentment towards her for that, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, you missed, like, I was having actual like anaphylaxis and you're just like, well, that's anxiety, like that's really hard to realize when you're 35 years old and have a 2-year-old, that was happening to you when you were like 3, 4, or 5. Um, I had to like really dig deep um, to like kind of understand that from my parents. And I actually started asking a lot about like other intergenerational symptoms, because then I got diagnosed with Lyme, and I've never had a tick bite, but my mom is from near Boston and they had tick bites all the time. So I'm like, well, that can be passed congenitally. So that's probably how I got it. And so I'm asking like, and I found out that like my grandpa worked in a leather tannery. And the factory he worked in for like 40 years used hexavalent chromium, which is the chemical from Aaron Brockovich that like gave everyone cancer and autoimmune diseases, and is linked to a lot of allergy symptoms and a lot of stuff that's basically like mast cell related stuff. Um, so uh, Honestly, just like making the chronology and kind of digging back through the family tree, like you can do some of that on your own. But yeah, no, my family had a lot of resistance towards me doing that.
I bet. Yeah, my grandfather was a chemical engineer.
Oh,
So we and the area we grew up in, it was nicknamed Chemical Valley in West Virginia. There's tons of chemical plants there, and the chemical plant he had worked at had brought everyone from wherever they were to that area. So it was like they call it one of my dad's friends wrote an article about it, like savant syndrome, that they brought in all of these like really smart people from out of the area into this area, and then everyone was like exposed to all these chemicals, and now all of their children are like maybe on the autism spectrum.
wow.
So yeah, it's really, if you can do that, great, you know, to kind of pinpoint, because I have lots of clients who have done this as well. Like, oh, wow, I just found out that my grandmother and my great grandfather and all this, like they were exposed to these variety of chemicals, or they worked on these farms and things like that. Can be such a huge piece of the puzzle for maybe why some of these genetic SNPs were turned on or off, and why like the downstream effect happened, and it's not just your fault. It's not just, the recent exposures
Yeah.
you've had.
The irony of the like savant syndrome or whatever it was you said is that people, to bring it to RCCX, people who are of higher intelligence tend to have this genetic and psychological profile where they have highly sensitive immune systems and really highly sensitive brains, which is why they're smarter in the first place. And then they are more sensitive to those kinds of chemicals, um,
Hmm.
and more likely to develop the psychological and the like chronic illness symptoms associated with that, which is unfortunate, but like it's crazy because you can see those patterns through communities like all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into RCCX theory. I mentioned you're the only person I've still to this day ever seen mention this, and I've been following mast cell doctors and circles for at least five, no, more like 7 years now. So what is RCCX theory?
So it's essentially a cluster of genes that's on chromosome 6 in the histoimmune. I'm going to mess this up. It's like in part of your DNA that deals with your immune system. And it's highly sensitive and highly mutagenic. And it's, as opposed to other genes, where you just get like one from each parent basically, and you can inherit just one mutation or zero or two. Um, it's it's more adaptable and it's more responsive to the environment. So you can get multiple from your parents and your grandparents. So you can get like eight, and three of them are mutated, basically, um, because it's trying to adapt intergenerationally to the environment that is more dangerous for whatever reason. Like you're exposed to these toxins, you're exposed to chemicals, you're exposed to pesticides on the farm, whatever. And it's sort of a double-edged sword. A lot of people, when they get into learning about RCCX, feel like it's like a burden. But personally, like it grants you being gifted in a lot of different ways. You can be physically gifted, like as an athlete. Hypermobility is a component. So like a lot of dancers and gymnasts and like Olympians, I see it like all over the place. But of course, there is also the propensity for chronic illness and for psychiatric illness, because you essentially have a highly sensitive immune system. Um, and what happens is, so in utero, uh, if your mom has this, she likely has low basal cortisol. So cortisol is what gives you like the energy to be responsive during the day. And basal cortisol is the amount you wake up with and the amount you should have throughout the day. So if that is low, your response cortisol, there's like two ways your body will give you cortisol to do things. So your acute stress response is kind of heightened. And that is an adaptive response to, if you're having to be super responsive, if you live in a really stressful environment, whether you perceive it as stressful or not, like your body perceives chemicals as stressful, right? So you're having to use the acute stress response all the time. So your body will turn down the basal cortisol so you don't wake up with as much, so that you can deal with the kind of bursts of cortisol throughout the day. And so in utero, what that means is you basically develop, like, your brain changes. You have a larger amygdala, which is the fear center and the responsiveness center of your brain. The kind of hormone milieu of just how your body is designed changes. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. And I kind of think, like, early on in life, it gives you a lot of advantages, because you can be super responsive and you can become like an elite athlete, or like really smart at whatever thing you're smart at, because you're able to go into this like turbo mode where I mean, a lot of people, like, with these kinds of genes, don't have to try as hard to like do well in college or whatever. You just like cram the night before, or you like crank out an essay and you end up doing really well. It's not great for your body.
Yeah.
Like, you are really tapping into your reserves, but you don't know it's your reserves, because that's just how your body has operated for your whole life.
Yeah, definitely. I resonate with a lot of it. And I actually pinpointed or plugged in my genes. I have my whole genetic testing done, and I actually had way more of the hypermobility genes, which I was kind of surprised about, and like the connective tissue stuff. But I had been hypermobile my whole life. It just never bothered me until after I got sick, and then all the debilitating symptoms started to creep up. But I didn't know that part about the low cortisol. I've had low cortisol since I've ever had it tested, even like in my mid 20s. Because again, when you are kind of growing up and you always have something wrong with you kind of keep searching, You're like,
Yeah.
I'll do this test this year, I'll do this test the next year. And so I've been testing myself and into like alternative health spaces since I was young, always trying to figure it out, always trying to figure out the puzzle. And my mom actually took us to a really great chiropractor who, I think he went on tour with like Guns N' Roses. Don't ask me why he was in West Virginia, because
That's
it's
cool.
a strange place for someone to end up, when I was in high school, and they wanted to give me ozone because I had eczema, and they were like introduced us to all these like alternative treatments. We did muscle testing in the office, and I was like, this is BS, but
Yeah.
it was it was kind of like an introduction to like, oh, there's like a million other things I could look into to figure out like why do I always have the problems and the people around me don't? Like even my sister didn't, right? So I love how this theory kind of explains that there is not necessarily a reason like, oh, you have this problem. Like I hate the labels of diagnoses and things like that, but just an explanation of like how you can support yourself a little bit better, or even how you can kind of navigate your way through the world if you do feel like you fall into this like cluster of genetic traits, essentially.
Yeah. I actually, I was really grateful when I found this because
Mhm.
after my experiences as a child and in high school, being so let down by the medical system, I completely checked out for like 15 years. I got a degree in psychology. I really like had a good understanding of that. But even then, like I looked into doing like a master's and a PhD in psych, and the only like programs that as I was looking into this was like 20 years ago. Um, the PhD programs were all about studying pharmaceuticals. They weren't about studying like the actual brain chemistry that like leads to these things. And I was like, well, that seems backwards to me. Like that's not what I would
Yeah.
want to do. So I remember thinking at the time, like, I'll just go work for a little while and wait for college to catch up to like what I want to do, these graduate programs.
Yeah.
It never really, I mean, there are other options now, but
Yeah.
it's still,
That's so funny. That's like exactly what I did. It was psychology because they didn't have any other explanation. So it must be like my behavior and the way my brain works. But
right.
then I became a counselor because I was like, well, what can I do with psychology? Nothing.
Yeah.
And then I went back to school for functional medicine because that I finally found something that was like, oh, this is it. This is the alternative stuff that I finally can learn about. And then I always joked, like, if I get a PhD, it's going to be psychoneuroimmunology, because that's really the
Yeah.
only one that I found that might be helpful.
Yeah. That's such an interesting field. Yeah. So when I got really sick in 2020 and I knew immediately that COVID had caused me psych symptoms. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, so viruses cause psych symptoms? Like, and I'm asking my child's pediatrician, like, do you know that viruses cause psych symptoms? Because there's viruses in vaccines. And she's like, like, and I tell her like I'm trying to do all this research and figure this out because I've gotten very sick all of a sudden, and my daughter had like rashes and some mast cell stuff. And she started exhibiting like a little bit of OCD, which is hard to recognize in a 2-year-old. But I'm like, no, she's doing weird repetitive things she didn't do before. Like, this is new. Um, and I tell the pediatrician, like, I don't know what to do because as I'm researching this, like, I'm finding a lot of stuff that's very concerning to me. Like, do you have any advice? And she just said, keep researching. And I was like, gobsmacked that she basically was validating what I was coming across. Like, and so as I kept doing this research, I actually came up with RCCX theory before I found it because I was like, okay, there is a clear pattern of like high, like perfectionist, anxious, like highly successful women who get sick um, and then deal with all these symptoms and end up with chronic fatigue and all this litany of, because by now I'm in all the groups and I'm finding all the research on like mast cell and POTS and blah blah blah, and I'm like, why does everybody fit this psychological profile, right?
Yeah.
um, and so I finally, it was like September or October. Um, so I thought I came up with this theory all by myself, but I didn't know the genes or anything around it.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was all centered on the like hypermobility piece because I'm like looking at all these gymnasts who then later in life get really sick or whatever. Um, and so I come across like an article about like giftedness and this theory that someone had come up with. And I think it's Dr. Sharon McGlathery who came up with RCCX theory. And I think she put the information out in like 2016. She did write for like a medical journal about it, but then they wouldn't publish it. And they were really like wishy-washy on it because it undercuts a lot of the pharmaceutical model because it shows a clear like pathophysiology for why these things are happening, and it also shows that like a lot of the medications are not the right solutions for these things. um, so when I found it, an actual theory written by an actual doctor and psychiatrist who had actually put together this whole chart, like a flow chart of like how your hormones go haywire in certain ways and how you develop POTS and mast cell and how the connective tissue genes, whether you have hypermobility or not, if you can have a connective tissue mutation that doesn't lead to hypermobility, that still worsens these kinds of chronic illness symptoms. And so when I'm getting diagnosed with EDS at like 35 years old, they're like, well, you're not as hyperflexible now. I still like, met the diagnostics, but I'm like, dude, I used to be like way more. Like, why am I stiff now? And it's like, well, it's you're older and you go through phase changes. But anyway, so finding something that actually like put it all together, it was like a huge like light bulb went off for me. And then I was like, well, I have to check out of the medical system again because they don't understand this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't become a practitioner yourself just to like order your own testing.
I thought about it, but honestly, I was so sick. I was like bedridden for a year. I was in a wheelchair. I had a 2-year-old. Like I really had to figure out how to help heal myself. So I was in California at the time where I'm from, and there was a specialty clinic in Palo Alto where there were these doctors, the Center for Complex Medicine. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. And so I connected with them. I was on like a 9-month waiting list. And so I signed up with them. It ended up costing over the course of a year, like, or maybe 2 years, it was like $10,000, which is a lot of money, but over 2 years to actually like get the labs and get some advice from an actual MD, like a rogue MD who doesn't take insurance, but was connected to Stanford and would send me for certain testing if I needed it. It was actually really good. It helped me a lot. And she actually knew about RCCX theory, although she didn't like bill herself as someone who like used it or anything, but she was a little bit younger than me, I think, and she dealt with her own chronic illness. So she really helped me because I went into the first appointment with like, here's all the labs I want. And here's, because I really still, even though I felt like I knew a lot, like I'd done a lot of research, like I was in really bad shape. Like for a lot of the summer of 2020, like I'd had mini strokes and I couldn't read for several months. Like which was horrible for me because I like really idolize my own brain. Like that's how I was going to dig myself out of this hole. And then I couldn't look at words on a page. Like I couldn't focus my eyes. It was like really horrible. So, but by the time after the, 9 months on the waiting list and all the research and stuff, I was like maybe a year and a half into being like really sick. I'd like started on mast cell stabilizers. I'd figured out certain supplements I could take, mostly all food-based. And I started really slow, really tiny amounts of things. I'd cut down a lot of foods, like low histamine diet. And so I was like stabilizing myself by the time I got to her, which was really helpful. But yeah, it's so much work to be a practitioner. I would rather give much more generalized advice on how to like approach this rather than the like specific like running other people's labs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is a lot, and everyone is so bio-individual. So for the people listening, I know the thing she's gonna talk about is probably you're probably gonna want to go out and try this yourself. Just listen to your body. Not
Yeah.
medical advice. This is just her story. In fact, some of the things I think you've tried like did absolutely nothing for me. And a lot of my
Yeah.
clients, nothing. So
Yeah.
it's still very ideal to work with somebody who understands this stuff. So tell us a little bit about how you started to crawl out of it. Like you started with low histamine diet, maybe some mast cell stabilizers, but were food based. What else really seemed to move the needle?
For me, like, okay, for the mast cell symptoms, which most of the stuff I feel is really rooted in mast cell, even the POTS, like I really feel like POTS is rooted a lot in mast cell. Although it's also hypermobility of, like I have really lax veins. I was having a lot of like all of a sudden got varicose veins. I had mini strokes because I was having like clotting issues and just like weird blood flow stuff. My blood was super thick. Like I had to get like 60 labs, but I had to break it up into like 10 appointments because the blood it was like drawing blood from a stone. So yeah, and I'm a really like big picture person. I don't really like talking about the supplements I used, but I will. But every time I do, people are like, well, that did nothing for me, or I had a horrible that. And I'm like, okay, so
Yes,
Hippocrates,
everyone's very different.
yeah, I always go back to Hippocrates, who is like ancient philosopher, doctor, said he kind of invented this like rule of thirds. Like he said that a third of when it comes to any given treatment, a third of people will see improvement, a third of people will see nothing, and another third of people will see like symptoms or side effects. Like it'll be negative for them. So your mileage may vary, but the things that were really impactful for me at first, well, at the very beginning, I was prescribed cromolyn sodium, and I did nasal crom, which is a nasal spray of cromolyn, and I did these little ampules that I drank. And the craziest thing, the first day I took that, I saw like color return to the world. Like I didn't realize that my view of color had changed. And I just saw like the greens get greener, and like this dress I had just bought, I was like, oh, that's ugly. Like I didn't realize the colors were like so garish. And I did that for a couple months, and then I started getting like nosebleeds, because even if something works for you, it can stop working for you, or it can still have like detrimental effects. So then I switched from that to quercetin, which was very helpful. I started taking a couple different forms of magnesium, and I started taking vitamin C. At first, I had tried ascorbic acid, which gave me kidney stones, which I'd never had before, which was terrible. And I'd never had a problem taking vitamin C before. So then I switched to, I can't remember if it was acerola or camu camu, but a food-based vitamin C. And then after like, and I cut down on like high histamine foods. I was having reactions to like so many things. Like I would eat nuts and start having like, I'd fall asleep immediately. I was having like narcolepsy. Like it was the craziest experience of my life. Like I've never had so many symptoms come on so quickly, and just so many. And then doctors just being like, I guess we can diagnose you with that next. And I'm like, I don't want that. Just what is wrong with me? Like, why can no one answer? Like, this is obviously not just like I have 30 new syndromes. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So after about 6 to 8, probably 6 months of stabilizing mast cells, I started introducing other foods. Like I was able to eat more red meat. I knew by then I was so depleted across the board. Like and I've had anemia my entire life. And
Yeah.
my
Big piece. Yeah.
iron and my ferritin were just like in the toilet. And so I really felt like I needed both copper and zinc, and my labs showed that too. And I know that's like, people think it's one or the other. It can be both. So
Oh, no, it can be both. Yes, absolutely.
so I started taking a very tiny amount of beef liver supplements. And then after maybe a month of introducing those, and it was like I took like half a pill in some applesauce like a day. That's how I started. It was like the tiniest amount, and I titrated up. After a few months of that, I started doing oysters. I'm trying to remember. I feel like those are the things that really moved the needle at first. And then my lab started showing like my iron was better, my B12 was better. And then by that point I got with the MD who was helping me, and she was still giving me like suggestions on some synthetic things. And so I tried a couple different forms of B12, and like I can't take any form of B12, even like, methylated, whatever. Like I do have the MTHFR mutation, and maybe I could take those things now. I'm a lot more stable now, but like at the time it was just like, no, my body rejected anything that was not a food and even rejected a bunch of foods. You know, it was just like, it was just not going to work for me.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. I feel like when we run, so did you do just blood work or did you do any like specialty labs?
I just did blood work. I didn't do like the hair analysis. I did
Okay.
like
And
urinalysis.
test. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because I feel like on in blood work, it can give enough, but it leaves so much to the imagination, especially with like vitamins and minerals. And with bees, I find that almost every person that I've worked with is very sensitive to the B vitamins. And we have to start so slow and usually like at the very top of the methylation cycle, like tiny amounts of B2 and like B12 is at like the end. So sometimes that
Yeah.
helps. Like if you're listening and you're like, yeah, I can't take B vitamins at all. Oftentimes you desperately need them, but it's just like one at a time and in a correct order. Um, and then so you started, what was the first thing you noticed when you started to feel better? Like, oh, this is working, or like, okay, my labs are better, but did you like physically and emotionally feel better?
Yeah, the first things I noticed, honestly, the first things I noticed with mast cell stabilizers was that I didn't feel so crazy. Like it immediately felt like my anxiety was reduced, like I started being able to read again. Like there was just like so much brain inflammation that I just couldn't function. And I was so overwhelmed and I was so like, I mean, it was overwhelming, like losing my health and my career and not being able to just function as a mom or a person at all. Um, but the first things I noticed were psychological symptoms. Um,
Mhm.
and brain related symptoms. And then I started being able to like actually get up and like do more things. And like I didn't need a wheelchair for to walk like short distances anymore. Um, I noticed my POTS symptoms reduced a lot. The vasculitis stuff that I was dealing with reduced. I had a lot of crazy like nerve pain. I ended up being diagnosed with small fiber neuropathy. And I have like half the nerve function that I should in my body, which is annoying. But I feel like my nerves started functioning better, even if they're damaged. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And that's
and
just from the chromal and sodium and like the stabilization of the inflammation.
yeah, I would say it was more from the quercetin because that I was on like longer. Like the
Okay.
chrome like 2 months and then the quercetin was like 3 or 4. I
Okay.
started noticing like, okay, this is really helping. Because you know, mast
Hmm.
cells live for 2 months, so I feel like they were really
Yeah.
psychotic for a long.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I
And
did the first time I took the nasal spray, I remember being like, oh my God, I can see color and I don't feel so anxious. Like I
yeah.
noticed that like immediately.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up medications too, because so many people in the health space, especially if you got sick after you were already kind of like, oh, I'm a healthy person, they're so resistant to these medications. But as you said, mast cells, they recruit all their other mast cell friends. So once that cascade has started of
Yeah.
that inflammation, it's really hard to stabilize. I mean, nothing natural touched what I was experiencing at all. Like I would have been, I don't know if I'd ever recover if I didn't do medications for 6 to 9 months is I think the amount of time that I was on a couple different ones. Because you absolutely have to reach that point of stability or they're just going to keep recruiting the new ones that are being made, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, let's kind of switch gears now because I want to go into your theory on mast cell or the C word being more of like a spiritual warfare that we're all kind of dealing with now. And I want to know a little bit about your career first as to like what your history is with these types of theories.
Um, well, my career was I was a consultant in public transportation in California, and so I worked on like multi-million and billion-dollar public projects. I was a financial advisor and like strategist around these projects. And I worked with a lot of politicians and public servants and public agencies. Um, so I already was like disillusioned with the medical field, right? And now I work in government, and I see like exactly how effective they are. Uh, and I was in the office for about a month at the beginning of the pandemic before I got so sick I had to leave. And I remember the like first or second day, there was one of my colleagues. We were working on this huge project with a lot of like public scrutiny. And I was like, oh, this is a disaster because we're trying to like get people to fund this like Bay Area project based on the fact that everybody has super commutes and like now nobody goes to the office at all for the foreseeable future. Um, and the first thing this guy says on this like Zoom call we're all having to like, it's like a war room to strategize about like how we're going to handle the pandemic or whatever, like how we're going to spin it basically. And the first thing this guy says is never let a crisis go to waste. And I'm like, this is a disaster. Like this is a horrible environment. And I remember this very clearly because this was right before I got sick. Because there was like a 10-day period where we all were working from home, and then my symptoms showed up and I was like, oh no, I got sick. Like, but I had been quarantining for like 2 weeks, but I had it. And so I think that contributed to me. So I'm already thinking like, this is a disaster. Then I get sick and I'm like, this feels like man-made. And I know how, I just know how the government works or like how it doesn't. And so I start looking into it and I'm like, yeah, there's what am I trying to say? I'm like losing my train of thought. The like Wuhan like center in China, just like, oh, what are the odds? You know, like that. And
Right.
so initially I was like, whether it's just incompetence or an actual intended thing, like it was pretty obvious to me that the lab leak theory was like the most likely, it's just the most likely thing that happened.
Right.
And so then like through the summer, I'm like, I'm first of all, I can like barely read, I can barely think straight. Like I'm getting diagnoses left and right, but no real like solutions. And I'm trying to research these things. I'm trying to research my own health, but I'm also trying to research like, what is this virus? What has it done to me? Why is it causing all these crazy things when like I've had viruses? Like I had Epstein-Barr that gave me chronic fatigue for years. It did not feel like this. It did not cause me to have like crazy like hallucinatory like dreams and just weird experiences, and like the psychological symptoms were like too bizarre. So yeah, that was the beginning of me kind of opening a can of worms, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really love how you kind of explain the way that government works, the way that like the psychology behind all of these things, both sides. You're not like on a side in particular, but just understanding like, oh, this is the programming that they're trying to feed us. This is just how it works, guys. Like, there's no right or wrong here. It's gonna happen no matter what country you live in.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
It's just, it's, it kind of is what it is, right? And we just have to, we just have to figure out how we're going to live with the world being that way. It was very frustrating though, like that no one could like talk about these things or talk about the actual research coming out. Um, Even like legitimate research, like there was legitimate research coming out from Stanford saying, not necessarily the lab leak stuff, but like saying these things about what the virus was doing and how it was causing heart symptoms, right? Everybody thought it was this like respiratory thing at first. And I'm like, no, it attacked my heart. Like I would like to get like an echo or something, like something's wrong with my heart. And they were like, no, that's like a conspiracy theory. And I'm like, it's not a conspiracy theory. And this is like doctors at Stanford are saying this when I have a research paper from this guy at Stanford, like down the hall, but they don't talk to each other. And so there's no understanding of like what is what is real, basically. Like it's just all so obscured because nobody wants to take responsibility and everybody is just trying to like spin it for their own benefit, basically. And
Right.
there's
Yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, and then there's the whole thing with the revolving door um, between public servants and the private side. Like if you have a high level job with a certain president and a certain administration, let's say you're like a Democrat and you are like the head of the CDC. Well, when a Republican comes in, um, if they don't like you or your politics, you're probably going to lose your job. And so if you're the head of the CDC, like you have a pretty robust resume, right? So where are you going to get a job? At a pharmaceutical company. And so you're just going back and forth between these regulatory agencies and I saw this in public transportation, like the head of the FDA, and then they go and work for like Siemens or like the whatever, or consulting firms that I worked at. Like I worked with people who were former like DOT and former head of FDA and stuff. Um, and they were always like a big sell. Like we have this person who actually worked for the government and they can pull strings and stuff. Like it's not a secret. It's like the cost of doing business in America.
Yeah. Yeah. So who can you really trust? Like, if we can't trust the communication between all these different sectors and departments, and the medical side and the government side is always trying to not be responsible, who is out there for people like us that get sick, nobody's helping them, it's bajillion dollars to see certain types of people. Like, what would be your recommendation?
I really think I think it's important to be able to rely on yourself and to be able to trust yourself and like guide yourself through this. I think that's a big, unfortunately, like you can't just hire someone to do it for you. Um, and I think that's a big like mindset issue that we have. But I do think you have to hire people to help you with like certain things. So like I personally, I do have a big picture mindset. So it's easy for me to know like, okay, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to hire this person to help me with like these labs or this person to like look into this aspect for me. Um, and I wouldn't expect just one person to do all of it um, but I think it's important to do like a lot of research and really work on honing your discernment around um like you can kind of tell intuitively, like does this person feel trustworthy, like what is their background, are they selling something, like and are they selling something that actually works, like are there other people that have used this product or this protocol and like are they having success with it, or is it just everybody is selling this like in some sort of pyramid situation, like it's really hard, but I really feel like you have to lean on your own discernment around it and some people will be like, there are some people who I think are good at what they do, and I just don't need that. So I don't necessarily like follow them or pay that much attention to what they're selling or what they're doing or what they're promoting because it's just not applicable to me, but it doesn't mean it's not applicable to other people.
Yeah, so something else that you've talked about, like the intergenerational toxin exposures, but also there's that intergenerational trauma. So before we got on this hit record, I was mentioning that I binged your Britney Spears highlights. So that's something else you're really great at, is breaking down like these big people in Hollywood or politics, their stories. And a lot of us that develop these big illnesses, complex illnesses, we get into the health of the nervous system and the role trauma plays on us. Did you touch base on how that kind of how you see that showing up in your own life? And then did you do any trauma work? Did you feel like you needed any, like the term nervous system regulation that everyone's using these days?
So I had a lot of like I was unfortunate as a kid to not have a lot of medical attention, but I had a lot of psychological like support as a kid. Um, So my parents divorced when I was like a year and a half, and they both remarried by the time I was 5. So I had like the trauma of divorce, but I also had like two parent households basically. So there were some resilient factors there in my childhood when it comes to the trauma. Um, and uh, so when I was 7 though, and I had the vaccine injury because my mom was in graduate school for psychology and she was studying child psychology, she, instead of taking me to a doctor, took me to a psychiatrist who said I was having like these hallucinations. I haven't actually like talked about this much. I used to talk about it more, but I haven't so much recently. But I was very sick in bed with a very high fever, and I looked out my bedroom window and I saw the tree in our front yard turned into like a witch, and like these like branches came off. It was like her hands were the branches, and she like crawled and told me I was going to die before my 8th birthday. And I freaked out. I was terrified. I went and I told my mom. Um, and I guess, like, of course, she's studying psychology. So she's like, oh, a hallucination is a psychological thing. She doesn't think this is a medical thing because my daughter had a vaccine 2 weeks ago and she had strep throat a month ago. Pandas does not exist. Like, people do not understand that strep causes hallucinations and a lot of like psychological symptoms. So she takes me to the psychiatrist, best one in all of Sacramento in 1992. And he says, that I'm either crazy or lying. And his solution is to check me into a mental institution for a week just to see how it goes. And thank God my mom was like, no, I don't think we're going to do that. I really wish she would have taken me to a doctor, but I don't know if they would have recognized encephalitis anyway. But so then and that just kind of, I don't know, then I just kept getting sick after that. I didn't really have any more hallucinations. It kind of calmed down. I probably took allergy medications. I actually realized I took nasal prom during that time. So I probably was taking a mast cell stabilizer as my allergy meds as a kid, like off and on. And then in high school, because by this point, my mom is a therapist for adolescents, I got really sick, and she knew I was really sick, and she didn't really pathologize it as psychological. Like I got high fevers and strep throat that wouldn't go away, and then I couldn't get out of bed for like months afterwards. So we did a lot of testing. Like I had a lot of gut testing, barium swallow. They found ulcers and stuff. And I'd been in and out of therapy pretty much most of my life. And in high school, I was back in therapy after getting really sick because even though my mom didn't think like this was rooted in depression and anxiety, she's like, well, you should have a therapist to like, because this sucks. You know, this is a hard time for you. Oh, and also in high school, all 4 of my parents divorced. so that was another reason for the therapy. So I had just had a lot of, and I had a really good therapist in high school who would say things like, you know, you're just replaying these tapes and they're not really serving you. And just like a lot of these really good sound bites that I would like kind of lock away that really helped me throughout life. Like, you know, what evidence do you have that your dad is going to show up in this way? And I'm like, well, no evidence. And she's like, well, then why do you keep expecting it? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's dumb. You know, like just stuff that's like, okay, I can like stop these patterns of thinking. And so when I got really sick, like during the pandemic, I really just felt like, okay, and when I found RCCX theory, I was like, okay, it makes sense now. Cause I also went and got a whole bachelor's degree to try to thinking like, this is the root of my illness. And so I just felt like I needed to go all the way in on the medical side. I did a lot of my own like nervous system work, like meditating and like going outside and grounding and like just, I realized I needed a lot more physical support and a lot less. I needed to stop intellectualizing it kind of psychologically and start and like understand it from a medical, like a biochemical perspective, and also just like get more grounded in my body and get out of my brain trying to like psychologize it all. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. That was the stuff that helped me as well. Like just getting into the body, stop
Yeah.
thinking about it, interrupt
Yeah.
the pattern of trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't do any like specific, yeah, I didn't do anything specific, but I like moved to the woods and it's been really
That
helpful.
is the best nervous system regulation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to do a program. I want to reiterate that. Like so many people ask me, like, which program should I do? I'm like, whichever, if you feel like you resonate with one of them, you know, talk to them, see what their program's about. Do you actually need this? Because some people are too obsessed with their body, right? They're too into every little thing that's changing, and you might need something different than me, who was like, I don't feel emotion, you know? Like there's
Yeah.
different things out there for people. But what you did, you know, getting outside, nature, grounding, sunlight, those are important for everybody. So we can definitely have some overlap. Nervous system regulation doesn't have to be so structured. In fact, the less structured it is, and just being in nature, feeling where you are, feeling your body, getting out of your head is some of the best stuff for calming down mast cells.
Yeah, and I had a huge toolkit of like psychological supports that I had developed through my life. So
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like and there were some I was interested in certain things like I don't know, EMDR or whatever. Like there were just a lot of things that were on my list. I still have a lot of things on my list that I was like gonna get to eventually. And what really happened is I got pregnant in 2022 and was like, "Oh my gosh." Because that was the whole point for me was like a doctor
Yeah.
had told me I'd never have any more kids and I might just get sicker till I die. Like I had a horrible I had some horrible doctors in 2020 and throughout my life. But when I got pregnant in 2022, I was like kind of shocked. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to do anything while I'm pregnant. I'm not going to do any protocols. I'm just going to like, you know, stick to good nutrition and the supplements that work for me and, you know, whatever. I'm not going to try new things. Um, and I just kept getting better and better. And then I was like, maybe I should not keep trying new things all the
Yeah.
time. Maybe like 2 years of doing it got me like healthy enough to keep going on this trajectory. But I do think a lot of people they do need like some sort of psychological something. I just had probably 10 years of therapy and just like a whole list of like I knew how to stop myself from spiraling thinking. And once I found RCCX, I was like, oh, I'm doing this to myself, you know, like
Yeah.
and and it was just like, okay, I have to stop. There were just a lot of patterns I had to stop. Even the like I was really into intergenerational trauma stuff before that, but I was like, oh, maybe I should stop blaming my parents, even though it's their fault. Like, I just have to like kind of let go of some of that because they don't know. They're not
Right.
equipped.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a really beautiful place to end on. So I didn't even ask you, tell us your Instagram handle and what does it mean?
um, my Instagram handle is capitalism and glitter with periods on either side of the and. And actually, I started this blog in 2012. It was like a pop culture and design and politics blog when I lived in New York in my little shoebox apartment in Manhattan. And it's a quote from an Amy Poehler cartoon, like a very short-lived Amy Poehler cartoon, where she says, she's like a Girl Scout, and she says, "I'm going to change the world the only way I know how, through capitalism and glitter." And so I made that my like blog name um, 13 years ago. And then when I got really sick and was like, and I in the blog I put on hold for like 5 years because I was really busy at work. Um, when I got really sick, I was like, well, I'm going to resurrect that. But it's no longer this like liberal whatever thing that it was. It's like completely different. But I felt like the name still fit. And I cover like, it really fits what I cover between like politics and the medical system. But also like you have to just kind of let go of some of that. Like it's okay to be informed, but like don't make yourself crazy. Um, so yeah, it encompasses all of my multitudes.
Yeah, yeah, it's really unique. I love it. And again, some of the other really fun stuff that you do is like breaking down the Britney Spears story, the Kanye West story, some people in politics, some people that have been arrested, like going really back into their history, the government's role in things, like things that have proof of. I mean, it took me like 2 hours to do the Britney Spears story. So definitely check that out if that interests you, guys that are listening.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for hopping on. Also, I wanted to point out, you weren't just pregnant in 2022, you're also pregnant now, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
So
Months
if you
pregnant.
resonate with these stories or the RCCX theory, it doesn't mean you're going to be sick forever, like a doctor might tell you. It doesn't mean you can't also live a meaningful life, you can't have children, like you can recover from these things. So that was also why I wanted to have you on. Like, you're just a really great story of like, you got this, you can do this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been great talking to you.
Yes, you too. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye. Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.